Well, if the goal is to get more computer use out of your phone, it's the highest praise I can give a smartphone that it's so good, you might want to consider flipping last year's model to get it. This is a very rare award to give these days. The 1-year upgrade. So we gotta have a little comparison. The Vivo X90 Pro versus the new X100 Pro. Now, the X100 Pro is coming in swinging. It was officially launched in 2023. It's early in 2024, and Vivo is delivering what might be one of the best phones of the year. But if you have the X90 Pro, is the X100 good enough to entice you? All right, starting off with design, this is totally subjective, but I kind of like the X100 Pro a little better overall. Now, I wish I had a vegan leather back on this phone, but the redesigned and centered camera housing here, I think this looks cleaner. These two phones are pretty similar. It's almost like they were made by the same manufacturer. But centering the camera does make the X100 just a little more stable when you put it flat on a table. There's a little less of the table wobble, especially if you have to tap in the upper left-hand corner. The upgrades to the X100 Pro display are definitely appreciated, but mostly in the brightest conditions. The new peak brightness helps in sun, but of course, these settings are for very short bursts of activity, but when you need it, it's great to have it. It's very difficult to even demonstrate this now in the Gadget Lab. And the battery tech is also an interesting conversation between these two phones. The X100 Pro moves us up from a 4,870 milliamp hour battery to a 5,400 milliamp hour battery. But the smaller battery supports up to 120 watt charging, while the larger battery tops us out at 100 watts. Now, 100 watts is still crazy fast to charge a phone though, so I think the larger capacity is probably going to be more desirable to more consumers. A lot of this is going to feel similar. I'd say the haptics have just slightly more of a plucked string feel on the X100 over the X90, but even down to the speakers, they're pretty close. And both came really well stocked with a box full of accessories, including the fastest charger, the cable. I think that Vivo is back on track here, where the X80 Pro had a nicer sort of clip-on hard shell plastic case. The X90 Pro was using this less expensive plastic bumper, but for the X100, Vivo is splitting the difference with this nicer dark rubber bumper. No, I think it's pretty clear that one of the major differences between these two, the SoC. Now, I'm really excited to see that Vivo continues to partner with MediaTek. The Dimensity 9200 is a great performer, and it kept a very competitive performance per watt tier for 2023. But the Dimensity 9300 is just a completely different animal. Where we usually see, say, year-over-year performance improvements, we're often talking about, oh, 10% here or 15% there. By those standards, when you test with real-world apps, the 9300 is nearly a 2-generation improvement over the 9200 in a single year jump for CPU-bound tasks. If you would like a more in-depth collection of charts and graphs and an explanation of all of the different tests that I put these phones through, you can check that out. I have this published on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. But here's one test I love showing off, and that's video editing and rendering. I'll render a 1-minute UHD video with transitions and a soundtrack and a watermark, and the 9200 is quick. I also tested the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 in the iQOO 12. Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is a little bit quicker, and the Dimensity 9300 is significantly faster than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. There's just no way around it. At the time this video was shot, the Vivo X100 Pro with the Dimensity 9300 is the most powerful phone on the market today that lacks active cooling. To hang with this phone, you gotta put a fan inside the phone. But this device might not claim the crown for performance per watt though. This is much better behaved for thermals than I was expecting, but the extra battery capacity is probably needed to balance out the increased power draw for power users who who are really going to tear into this hardware. And I know folks like to kind of scoff at my video rendering tests, even though more people are uploading video to things like TikTok every day than they are playing super intense graphics games, but I don't want to let this off either. This is also a substantial improvement for GPU performance on the MediaTek front, taking a brilliant PC port like Alien Isolation, and I can average 100 frames per second. This is well and above something I can do on something like a Steam Deck. When we get games properly optimized for mobile, now we're starting to take advantage of these 120 Hz refresh rate displays in much higher quality gaming experiences. If you'll pardon just like a brief philosophical pause in the middle of this comparison, the Pros are usually the phones that are designed to be a tier lower. The X90 Pro is designed to be a tier lower than the X90 Pro Plus, and that phone was only released in China. So I'm not sure what Vivo is gonna do this year. I'd expect that later on in the year, we're going to see an X100 Pro Plus, and maybe they'll go with Qualcomm. If Vivo does go with Qualcomm, it means we'll probably get a return to this brilliant, super large ultrasonic fingerprint sensor. I would be really happy to see that show up on another phone. This thing is awesome. But even for getting slightly better gaming performance on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, an X100 Pro Plus running a Qualcomm chipset might not really be an upgrade. Getting into the camera conversation, this is also another solid improvement. The X90 Pro made one really awkward decision for sensors and lenses. This telephoto sensor was roughly a 2x zoom, somewhere around a 50mm equivalent. Now, Vivo has often promoted a separate sensor for portraits, and the X90 Pro lost the longer telephoto that we had on the X80 Pro and we got on the X90 Pro Plus. The trouble with this arrangement is a 1-inch type sensor is really good. Those portraits look really good using a 2x zoom crop. And so that makes the 50mm equivalent lens kind of unnecessary. And this is one of the things that the X100 Pro absolutely gets right. The 50mm equivalent look, that's awesomely tackled by that main camera sensor at a 2x zoom. And now the telephoto is closer to a 100mm focal length, roughly about a 4x zoom depending on what mode you're in. And better still, all three of these sensors are higher resolution. The ultra wide comes in with a 50-megapixel option now too, where the X90 Pro had a 12-megapixel ultra wide. And there are other improvements to image quality courtesy of a new co-processor. This is another thing that Vivo has championed for a couple generations now. I feel this helps return Vivo's lead in HDR and low light processing. It's shockingly fast at spitting out a bright image and often cuts scanning time in half over other phones' night modes. I mean, especially when we're looking at really low light situations, no one can crush that information down quite as fast as Vivo can. The X100 Pro is just a monster on all fronts. It's better built to compete directly against Xiaomi Pro and even the Pixel 8 Pro. And this is where I've got to get a little of my personal bias out of the way here. I had a really hard time with the X90 Pro. I love Vivo phones. I've done some sponsorships and some collaboration with the Vivo brand in the past, but it took me a while to find this phone's charm and where I felt it fit against competitors. The X100 Pro makes a much clearer argument for where it fits and who it competes against. Vivo just came out swinging, and it's difficult, maybe impossible, to find any combination of features on another phone that truly paces this price to performance. It's a crazy way to start off 2024. The X90 Pro is a very good phone. I like everything better on the X100 Pro. Now, I don't often award the 1-year upgrade flip, but the more you push a phone, the more the X100 Pro rises to the occasion. Both of these phones are ridiculous overkill for covering the basics like average consumers and using the basic settings and auto modes in your camera. These phones are hitters, and they should be driven much harder, especially for the ever-increasing price points that we demand from our premium tier gadgets. This phone right here could take over a content creator's whole mobile workflow video strategy. Now, looking back a little farther, the X100 Pro is a stunning argument for a 2-year upgrade. The X80 Pro was a very good phone for its time, but it is using that really hot Samsung-produced Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. It's using the smaller main camera image sensor. I would totally miss that really fancy fingerprint sensor switching up to an X100 Pro, but everything else about this phone, the performance, camera and photography quality, even down to the gaming, the X100 Pro is just so much better. So we've got a really interesting price war happening in 2024, and I've mentioned this in a few other videos, but phones made in 2023 should be crazy bargains. What's tricky though is tech cycles really silly fast. I'm really close. I am really close to awarding a 1-year upgrade for power users who are shopping powerful, expensive phones, which is where I need to hear from you. If you are a Vivo fan, would you flip an X90 Pro to score an X100 Pro? Are you maybe backtracking a little further? Do you have an X70 or an X80? Is this the phone that's gonna convince you to upgrade? I expect the tastiest of hot takes down in the comments below this video, and maybe smash that bell icon on your way down to comment. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All the support lately has been absolutely fantastic. Those of you who are clicking on links in my video descriptions, or maybe you're hitting my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, or perhaps you've joined the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, which is patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. These folks are the absolute coolest tech pals in the universe, and they get exclusive access to my camera deep dives, of which there's definitely going to be a lot to say about the X100 Pro cameras, and also they get that early access to my performance testing as I'm checking out video rendering, audio mixing, batch photo processing, and file management, file compression. They get the full scoop as I'm breaking all of these new phones in. They're basically the coolest, so I hope you'll check them out, because literally none of the videos on my channel would be possible without their generosity, without their support. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere, but these days I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, a little time on the Threads and the Flickrs, a lot less time on the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Twitters, and I will catch you all on the next video.